welcome to Fresh Laughs live show. We have this live show happening every Wednesday at noon in Pacific time. And we cover all things emerging tech and the metaverse, Web3, AI/ML, AI/VR, and more. Hello, my name is Elisha Terada. I'm the Technical Innovation Director at Fresh Consulting. And we have a co host, Johnny Rodriguez, who's a Strategic Innovation Director here at Fresh Consulting as well. And our live show is constructed in few segments. We're going to start with the word of the week, where we cover definitions and like explaining the meaning of the word and expanding on how it's relevant to you, especially in the business world. And we are going to also cover lightning news so that you guys are caught up to everything that happened in the last week between the last live show and this live show. And today we have some special feature segments on Meta's VR prototypes. We're also going to talk about mass adoption for VR. And lastly, we have question of the week, where the hosts, me and Johnny, actually have no idea what the question is going to be, but we are going to answer the question. That will be a surprise for us at the end. And during the show, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment from wherever you're watching. You guys might be watching from Twitter or YouTube, and we also have LinkedIn. And we will post those channels where you can find us in other channels as well. But let's get started with the first show, word of the week, interoperable avatars. And I'm going to start with this one, Johnny. So avatars,
Sure.
we are all familiar with it, right? Whenever we sign up to the social media accounts, we would pick a static image to represent ourselves. And it could be representation of, best looking shot of my, awesome face. Or it could be the famous or popular approach of like using the NFT these days on Twitter, or some people might use icon that they just found online or they drew themselves, or maybe it's the image of their cats or dogs. Basically, it's a way to represent themselves online in the social media Web 2.0 era. And we're talking about interoperable avatars, which relates to how we represent ourselves more consistently, more in the Web 3.0 world. And Johnny, I think you have a lot more passion in this avatar topic, and I want to pass it off to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely have thoughts on this one. Yeah, I mean, I think so. One thing worth mentioning is that we have a full video where we actually talk about metaverse avatar interoperability and the need for it. We talk about platforms on it. I think if you type that in, I was actually just checking this out, Elisha. It's now like the top thing on Google. So we're getting a lot of uh, um, it's got a lot of that SEO scored
Oh, wow.
because there's a lot of content in there for it. So definitely go and watch that. That's like a whole hour and a half. So I won't dive into that. But what I want to say is that I definitely consider, like you talked about, Web 3.0, Web 3 essentially, and how we represent ourselves. That's going to become more and more important as we go into the future of the internet. And how we represent ourselves is evolving. So we're even going to talk about some of that. I think we even talked about it in the lightning news last week. But uh, essentially, we want to be able to have a way to represent ourselves. It might be more in a 3D aspect now. So it's like as you participate in virtual environments, maybe they're metaverse environments, maybe they're virtual environments, maybe it's as an avatar on Zoom. That's something that's available. It's available on Microsoft Teams. It's an actual 3D model of a fox or things like that. So being able to represent yourself in 3D will become more and more important. And that'll be things like you'll start to think about things like wearables. You start to think about things like hats and watches and all your digital assets that go with you. But the interoperability part is like a very important key and key aspect to this foundation of the metaverse, where we think like in the future when there's all these different verses that exist, you will need to be able to travel between one environment to the next environment without having to log in again or having to represent yourself differently, right? Similar to similar to like what you might imagine with like Google sign in, right? Like Google single sign on, right? You might actually go and want to log into one platform and then your avatar comes with you. It'd be something similar to that. There are a few platforms that exist that are trying to build that, but that is going to become more and more important. And that interoperable piece is like the key to be able to go from one verse to the next verse to the next verse. As we know, and we've talked about, there are over 200 plus and growing almost every day, kind of virtual environments or metaverse environments that exist. And that will become more and more important.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different from traditionally. I would just use my same image of the photo and upload the one image to different places, but it will be 3D representation of ourselves, such as like clothes that I buy or the shoes that I buy, that would carry on automatically through the multiple metaverses out there versus
Yeah.
just like a traditional like cut and paste or copy and paste. It's like
Yep.
representing my unique identity. Like I'm
Yeah.
one identity that works across multiple.
I think the best way to
Yeah.
think about it is like a driver's license. Imagine if your driver's license, it's your official identity represented in a state, right? Imagine if your identity were to be a digital driver's license, and there is a 2D version of it, there's a 3D version of it, and anytime you visit an environment, whether it's a 2D social media app like LinkedIn, or it's a metaverse environment like Spatial or Decentraland or Somnium Space, you would basically be able to log in with the same login and be able to represent yourself in that spectrum of Web 2 to Web 3.
Cool. And if anybody has any question, I know it's like a big topic and sometimes it's hard to understand without seeing it for yourself. We would love to answer any questions if you have any to as a follow-up questions. Let's move on to our lightning news. And first lightning news of the day is the Meta Avatar store. We just talked about avatars, Johnny. So,
Yeah, it's really relevant.
mhm.
This is an interesting article because, as it says, I'll read some of the description here. It says to offer you more ways to customize your avatar, we're launching the store with digital outfits to purchase from. I'm not even going to say that name. I don't know that because I'm not in fashion, but Prada, Tom Brown, along with our existing free outfit options. Um, and it says our new Meta Avatar store will roll out in the coming weeks on Instagram, Facebook, and Messenger. So
That's very interesting. Yeah.
as I talked about, it's not rolling out to the Quest yet. It's not rolling out in VR in that 3D realm. What they're saying is we have a way to represent ourselves. They have a particular style, as you can tell, it's very like stylized and cartoony a
Mhm.
little bit. That's intentional for Meta. A lot of platforms have chosen a different style and different platform. We're gonna eventually we're gonna see a lot of different um, it's going to be there's going to be a lot of different styles, right? But essentially, today you can go and select your hair and your eye color and what shirt you might wear and your pants, and there's like a certain amount of selectable options, and you can coordinate those, and that turns into I don't know how many permutations. We could probably do the math. I won't. But what this news is that hey, like not only are you just creating an avatar, now there's a metaverse avatar store where you can go in and buy actual name brand Prada outfits, for example, or Balenciaga. I have no idea how to
Mhm.
say that. If anybody knows how to say that, put
Yeah.
it in the notes.
It it's also interesting that it's coming to the Web 2.0 world too. So it's like, okay,
I
now
mean,
we're
exactly.
blending the line a little bit.
It's coming
Cool.
first to 2.0 again to be able to do one, then to go to the other. So pretty interesting
Y-
news. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll probably test it out when we get to play with it later.
Yeah. And next news is the Neil Stevenson, who is the author of the Snow Crash, where the word metaverse was supposedly invented. It's starting a metaverse company, Johnny. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you know how there's like a quote that's like straight from the horse's mouth or something like that, where it's like you never like it's hard to actually have like the person that created the thing or that invented the word or that created the initial version of that technology to actually go and um, have that like years to pass, right? Tons of years to pass, and then for them to come and say, "Hey, after 3 decades, hey, here's what I think we need to be building." So Neil Stevenson is considered the father of the metaverse. I think it's debatable, but what the reason they do that is, like you said, for the book. You said you just got the book, right?
Yes, I just bought the book. Everyone keeps talking about, yeah, it first came from the book Snow Crash, and I don't know how many people actually read the book when they talk about the origin of the
Yeah.
word, right? But like, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read it, and apparently it has some debatable parts in the book, which I won't go into the detail, but it's a it's a start, right? It's a novel, it's a science fiction, I assume, and
Yep.
it was pretty cheap on Amazon.
Yeah.
So if you're
So
interested
he
in, yeah.
So yeah, so he's an author. Like he's not a technologist per se, but he's an author that envisioned this future that might that is, what's considered the metaverse today, right? Like this future of like fully immersive kind of worlds where you're interacting and you no matter where you are in the world, you can go in and like connect with people. And there's a lot more to that detail. Later, as many of you know, Steven Spielberg did a depiction of that book, Ready Player. I want to say Ready Player Me because
Well,
of the Avatar
yeah,
system, but it's Ready
yep, yep.
Player Ready Player One. um, so the movie Ready Player One by Steven Spielberg was a depiction of the book. So that later came out, and there's word that there's a Ready Player. I don't know if it's called Ready Player One Part Two or Ready Player Two, but there's a sequel to that that's gonna later
Oh,
come
interesting.
and stuff too with that. But anyway, so this particular author, he's teaming up with one of the as an entrepreneur, essentially blockchain. They're building a blockchain technology startup dedicated to an open metaverse. So it's a big deal because it's coming from him as an author. But the bigger piece of news, in my opinion, is the fact that as he depicted in the book in 1992, right? There's like he's saying that the openness of the metaverse is going to be super critical, an important critical part. We talked about avatar interoperability. If you were to go and look at a list of the future of the metaverse, having an open metaverse is would absolutely be on my list personally as one of the most important things that's needed for this metaverse. So for like the future of the metaverse. So it'll help. There's going to be lots of big companies. We have like Meta, and we're going to talk about probably Roblox later and others that are in the space building these virtual worlds. And so this thought about having open protocols, having some interoperability between things, keeping things open is going to become more and more important. He's not This isn't his first rodeo. Like he was actually he worked with Magic Leap when that was like getting some hype, Elisha. So he actually was involved with some of that team with Magic Leap and helped to kind of form and essentially consult um, as they were envisioning the future with kind of augmented reality. And so it's going to be interesting to see that. So the company is called Lamina One. The article's in VentureBeat, but it's all over the place. If you just type in Neil Stevenson, you get more details there. But pretty interesting.
Pretty interesting. And it actually connects to the next lightning news topic. Microsoft, Meta, and others, including Lamina One, are founding a Metaverse Open Standards group. The Metaverse Standards Forum will focus on pragmatic, action based projects like hackathons and prototyping tools for supporting common standards. It's also interested in developing consistent terminology for the space. And this was an article example from The Verge. And as we try to help uh, educate on the terms, right? The word of the week, which we always do every single week, trying to explain what the word means. It is difficult because there's no set definition for a lot of these terminologies, and we are still in the era of figuring out what does it mean to be considered a metaverse. Are there some rules to exclude some things, like is 2D not a metaverse, or is it a metaverse? Do we need metaverse to be like tied together with the VR experience, or is it more free form that it's just like any website applications or web games or web virtual worlds where you could consider anything to be like almost like a metaverse if you want to call it, right? So this foundations getting together to define that is interesting. But what's interesting is while it includes companies like the Web3C, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Sony, Unity, those are the and Lamina One, those are really big players. But it's also missing out on the other big players like Apple. Like we know they're building on the VR AR. Niantic, they're very big on the AR,
Mm.
and we all play Pokemon Go, released by Niantic, and Roblox. Like that's like almost like the not a foundation, but it's like it's what brought, I think, a lot of attention to the virtual worlds. And there are so many players. We covered this in the past on the Roblox. It's probably one of the most popular, I think. The metaverse that we would
Yep.
consider, even though it started more as a game and there was no Web3 components, or there was no interoperable avatars, but we would still consider it like a form of the metaverse. And coming together to define what's included, what's excluded is very interesting. Johnny, do you have any initial take on this?
I'm actually like super impressed and like I'm at awe at the fact that this is happening. This is cool. Like, I think, and you probably know this way better than me, Elisha. I was going to ask you, like, what other, when have there been other times where there have been partnerships like this when it comes to technology adoption? What came to mind was like Bluetooth standards. I was thinking about USB and like how now there might be, like, that might be more governmental, but I'm thinking about like forums and standard committees
Hmm.
that are multiple companies are coming together to do things. Um, but
I
yeah,
think a
like
lot of it is a hardware, right? Like even
hardware related. Yeah.
HDMI, Wi-Fi signal, all these 5Gs and whatever Gs. I think
So,
it matters a lot because physical products, you can visibly see a waste
yep.
or incompatibility, and consumers gets frustrated easily. Whereas in software side, I think it's a little bit more soft on the standards.
Exactly. So it's not super common on the software side, but I'm actually impressed that this is happening. And it's cool to see the brands, some of the brands you mentioned, like Meta, Adobe, Epic, IKEA, Microsoft, Nvidia. Like these are big names. Qualcomm. Like one of the things I see on their website, which by the way is at Metaverse dash standards
Mm,
org. It's an organization. It tells you there's a section here that says member driven activities and projects. So this is something I want to read if it's okay. It just
yeah, go.
says they're going to be involved in helping direct the needs and interest on topics included but not limited to. Ready? So these are the things they've already identified as things they're going to talk about: interactive 3D assets and photorealistic rendering. So the quality level at which the assets and the environments probably will look. So there's going to be a standard there probably. Human interface and interaction paradigms, including AR, VR, and XR. That's a huge deal. There's probably a huge effort there. Imagine if they, for example, said this, right? This gesture that you, if you're familiar with the Quest, this looking at your hand and going like this is going to launch the menu in a virtual environment. Imagine if that was, accepted across all of these companies as the way you interact with menus. So like there could be a lot of advantages to doing some of that consistency and a lot of the
Mm,
standardization.
it's like a
User
UI
created
UX
content.
almost. Yeah,
What's that?
it's almost like the UI UX in web
Yes, some
design,
UI
right? Like
UX
hamburger
standard.
menu means it's an actual
Yes,
menu,
exactly. Like,
or
let's
things like
establish
that.
the
Yeah.
hamburger menu as the go-to way when we go to mobile. Like, imagine if that would happen. People still do really creative things with that today. Other things on here really quickly are user created content. Don't have a lot of thoughts there. I'm sure there's a lot there. The next one is what we just talked about: avatars, identity management, and privacy. That's going to be huge. I'm really curious to see how that evolves, what kind of standards get placed there. Financial transactions, right? Are they going to be blockchain? Or are they not? How does that work? IoT and digital twins. And last one is geospatial systems. So about three or four of these I don't really know about, but some of these others are really interesting. So
Yeah, I think we'll
yeah, I'm excited to see
follow.
what happens.
And yeah, as they release some announcements on the standard, I think we'll cover and debate on each decisions they make. That will be a
Yeah.
fun show. Cool. Well, we will segment now into top news discussion articles that we find very interesting to cover. And this first one, Johnny, is very exciting. This came from a video on YouTube by a channel called Adam Savage's Tested. I actually never heard of this channel before, but they have nearly 6 million subscribers. And I was like, what is this channel that had some, chance to like talk directly with Mark Zuckerberg, and they get to roam around the reality labs. I think it's in Redmond under Meta, and basically interviewed engineers and hardware, looking at the hardware and look into the future of where the VR headset is headed. And their goal in the lab that they have is to figure out where do we want to go in the future? What's like the ultimate form of where the VR should be? And then they will jump into the future of this needs to be solved. And ex- we are going to create a lot of experimentations to get to the goal. And then they actually get to the goal. And they actually show in the video like where they landed into the future already.
Interesting.
And what they're trying to do now is walking backwards and figure out, okay, how do we converge or how do we achieve that same effect that they've already discovered down into the consumer headset size. If you think about Tesla, how they started with just jamming a lot of battery pack together. And if you read the biography of the Elon Musk, I recommend it's a really good book. They talk about the backstories of how during the demo of the Tesla, there will on the backstage there will be a staff members like fanning the battery because it would just overheat and it would only last for a short amount of seconds just for the demo, and then they have to go back in the backstage and then fan out the heat. Basically, they haven't solved the heatsink problem. It's just overheating. It's not operable. It's not safe to operate, but they've
Mm,
already achieved the goal of the battery powered car. So Meta is in the same position right now where they've spent so much time and money in R&D with the amazing engineers they have to achieve where it should be as a VR headset to achieve what they call the visual Turing test, and I'll uncover each points in what it means.
wow.
It basically means how to make the VR experience to match how human eyes naturally perceive in reality so that you don't get like motion sickness or you don't feel like something doesn't quite feel right when you're looking at object within the VR. It's trying to match the reality of how our eyes work and perceive into simulating that inside the VR so it feels very natural. So that's the ultimate goal that they're trying to hit. And they already in the video they pretty much like got to where they want to be. It's just that without making the headset like super bulky with the huge battery and huge heat sink, it's kind of like going from the big desktop PC, right? That we know it's all powerful, but people want the all computing power in their cell phone. How do we get this huge computing power to the cell phone so that it's actually usable and they don't have to be stuck to cables and all the heat sinks connected
Yeah.
to VR headsets, right? So they walk through all the steps. But today I want to actually talk about the three key points to achieving the visual Turing test. And the first one is focus shifting. The second one is adaptive resolution. And the third one is the brightness. So let
Can I
me
ask a quick
first.
question
Oh,
really before
good,
you dive
good.
in?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was just curious. So, because I'm coming into this blind a little bit. I had heard about it, a news article, and I saw some screenshots about it, but I'm coming into this completely blind. So, basically, if I heard you correctly, is they built the ultimate device, and then they're saying we need to figure out how to get there, right? Um, like it's probably a what $10,000 device, $1 million device, who knows, to get to this thing, but it's still a lot of things that need to be solved along the way. And so you're about to walk us through some of the things that they need to get to and solve still to be able to get to this future vision of this ultimate kind of VR headset that's already possible at a really expensive price point, right? But that we want to make accessible probably at the price point we eventually want. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and not just the price point, but it has problems like the battery energy consumption efficiency,
Got
or
it.
and there is
So
also problem with the size. Like it's maybe like if you were to really make it work, it might be like this size of a headset. That's not
got it. So
wearable,
it's
right?
about like solving the ergonomics, it's about solving the focusing, it's about solving the battery issue. So there's a lot to solve, but
Yep,
those are the types of things they're got. Okay, got it. Cool.
yep, yeah, yeah. Just imagine like they got the desktop machine to be like strong and powerful and can do a lot of things, but the consumer product needs to be more like iPhone size. So they're trying to figure out how to get
Got
from
it.
here to here, but they already know that they can actually do that desktop machine to be powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, as I go through slides, I think it will be a little bit more clear. And
Excellent.
yeah, so let me go to the first part of focus shifting, and let me preface this by explaining how, according to them, how our eyes naturally work. When we look at an object, right, like when I look at the cell phone, or if you look at your finger right in front of you, you can see that your finger is in focus, but everything else become a little bit more blur. So yeah, Johnny, and you know this because we both love taking pictures, and we learn how to use DSLR, and we know what
Yeah.
it means to have the focus point and everything
Yep.
else become blur.
Like
And I think
depth
a
of
lot of people,
field,
yeah,
bokeh,
depth,
that kind of thing.
yep, yeah, bokeh and depth, and a lot of people I think are now familiar, thanks to the portrait mode, on the photo taking, that you
Yep.
can blur everything else, besides the subject. So that's what our eyes naturally do, right? But in VR, when you look at one object to another object, they actually never blur out, because the depth of the field from lens to your eyes are still constant, right? Only in the images that you're looking at, they're in different distance. But because our eyes are designed to focus shift based on distance of an object between our eyes and the screen, when I look at object from one to another, so if you look at the top left, that's a great indication of
Oh,
how
yeah.
in one you can see that the tape recorder is in focus on the right side, but on the left side it's like a constant shifting of
Interesting.
the focus. So one problem is that you need to be able to adjust to that shifting in the image itself. So we're talking about altering the VR imagery to match our eye perception of where our pupil
Wow.
is focused on. So it has to simulate the focus. Does that make sense?
Because the reality is, like, you have a screen that's like, an inch away or less than an inch
Yep.
away from your actual pupils, but then you have to see where's the eye, is it dilating or not, right? To be able to see where you're looking, and are you looking past or are you looking up close? And then digitally making that distinction of blurring and doing that, and you have to do that at a really, really low latency.
Yep. Really low latency. I think it was 5 to 10 milliseconds is what they quoted,
Wow.
but that's very low. And we're talking about altering the image. Like we're trying to talk. It's not just like our eyes are near instant, but you have to simulate that in computing power. So if you look at on the right top image where the host is testing it out, by looking at the objects and then like focusing in and out object within the VR headset. And in the top left of the screen, you can see the multiple experimentation of hardware that they are demonstrating. And a lot of the demonstrations or experiments they've done in the past is based on the mechanical focus. So, Johnny, you use DSLR. With the DSLR camera, it's like you have the lens like that's this big, unless you're using like a pancake lens, which they've also tried. But lens can be big, especially if it can focus and also have a longer focal length where you can see farther away, right? And you know how you can like twist, right, the lens,
Yep.
like the barrel to adjust the focus. And these days you can have the digital focus where it would automatically shift it physically, but it's still physical
Yeah.
mechanical focus shifting, right? And that's a problem because that means you end up getting a thick lens. Like in the VR headset, if you actually look at what's inside, the lens portion is like really thick like this, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
and they try different ways of like shifting the focus and how can we make it smaller, in form factor, and also near instant focus, because with the camera it's pretty noticeable when it shifts. Like when I focus on camera, it's like wah, wah, wah. That's not fast enough for
Yep.
my eyes. So on the bottom right of this slide, you can actually see that's like the final form, or the current most recent form that they have. It's a
Mm.
digital. It's all electronical shifting on like a lens that's like this this like thin, and you'll see he was showing the thinness of the lens. Basically,
Yeah.
there's no mechanical component at all. And they
Wow.
are combining like I think 32 like thin lenses, and then they're just shifting the electronic portion of it to just adjust the focus
Wow.
like almost near instantly. So you can see that's like the ultimate form that they're going forward, and they're still like making adjustments to it. So instead of VR headsets, that's like big in front, right? Form factor. Maybe I should pull up the.
Showing the actual lens and how you have to actually scroll. I mean, I even think about my camera lens right now. If I bring my while you're pulling that up, if I bring my hand up to my screen, you can see that there's a focus here, and then I go out, and mine's doing some auto shifting, but the delay, I hear the delay of the mechanics are like
Mhm,
right.
mhm.
This is the
Yep.
Sony camera with the lens on
Yeah.
it. Then you
And
have
this is
yours.
Quest 2, right? And
Yep.
you have to have so much thickness right here to
Yep.
account for that. And in the future, it might be like way thinner, like represented in the slide, because the lens itself will be like so much thinner rather than like this large right now to solve the problem. So
Yeah.
that means basically smaller form factor, right? And more near instant because it's electronic. And when it's electronic, it's less prone to breakage because there are no mechanical component like moving around. There's no like cable
Yep.
or the lens that's being like moved around. And the next portion is this is about resolution. So resolution is really important. We are now used to owning like iPhones and computer screens that are in high resolution, and Apple came up with the term the Retina display, right? It packs, I think to qualify, I think it has to meet at least like 220 or 240 ppi, basically more pixel packed into a smaller region of the screen, right? And iPhone screens, it's Retina, but it's pretty big screen, right? To achieve that right in your eyes, like in the small form factor, we just looked at the video where the lens is like this small, right? To achieve the Retina display, guess how many resolution we need to pack here, Johnny?
Oof. I don't know. 4 times, 10 times. I
So,
don't
oh,
know.
sorry, that total resolution, like
Oh,
1,000 pixel, 2,000 pixel.
I think it's 2,000 per eye.
So the answer is 6,000
Oof.
per eye.
Wow.
And that's a lot of resolution, and that's one of the challenge that they're facing, that it's not really possible to pack like 6,000 pixel in the current modern technology, and maybe it will catch up to the point like, oh yeah, sure, throw in 6,000 pixels in a screen. So instead they're using this technique called foveated rendering, and that was the first time I heard, and that was a really interesting term what they were talking about. That basically that term describes this technique where only where you're looking at is going to be highly dense resolution, and everything else the resolution can be relaxed, meaning it could be lower in resolution.
Oh, okay.
So they're using eye tracking mechanism, so like where I'm looking at it they know exactly, right? So we know, okay, you're looking at this region, so we are going to concentrate all the power to create a high resolution image rendering, right? Because you don't want to be rendering 6,000 pixels per second, right? In the FPS world, you
Oh.
want to achieve high FPS in near real time. You can't just render it. Like even the gaming computers are like more or less 2K resolution at max for like really high fast FPS. And the older generation of computer gaming, you're still stuck to 1080p recommended for when you're playing, FPS game. We're talking about 6,000 resolution for human eyes to see it as very natural to what we see. That's a 2020 vision equivalent. And so to achieve that, you need to put all the power just on the little tiny section so that it's energy efficient, because we're not talking about gaming PC connected to the constant power, right? We need to be energy efficiently concentrating the high resolution rendering on just where I'm looking at. So that's with eye tracking and people steering. That was another interesting term that I don't think I can explain really well. It's one of the patented technology that they have, and combining with the foveated rendering, where they can selectively render high resolution on just the part that you're looking at, they're able to achieve this crisp look and on how things render. So in the demo on the left side of the video, you can see he's trying to read the text, and you can see the PPD. 60 PPD is the ideal for the real time. And they can adjust how it looks like if you lower the PPD, that you can't really read a text in far distance within the VR. But when you achieve 60 PPD, you can clearly read a text like a 22 vision you have. And on the right side of the video, you can also see a distortion because images are distorted when you're looking through the lens. You have to purposefully distort the image within the VR without the developer of the VR applications and game thinking about distorting it. The headset itself does the computer generated distortion adjustment so that it all looks uh, to be concentrated in your pupil that you perceive. And because it takes so much time for hardware iterations to happen, they built this lab section where you can simulate or emulate the
Yeah.
distortion. So you can just like emulate how the distortion will look like just by using this hardware. And they call it 3D TV tech that they just reused from 5-10 years ago. And with the headset, you can test as you look from the left to right how things are distorted, and test with the multiple users. They have to test with a lot of users to know like, okay, what's the sweet spot in adjustments, and then they can finally bring it to the hardware team and say, okay, this is the optimal distortion that we want to apply. And in the
Wow.
last portion, I know I'm going really fast, Johnny, is the brightness. And this is like something I guess I never realized why it felt a little bit weird. When you're looking at a world, the virtual world we kind of explored around, right, in the VR headset, and when you look at the image, it doesn't look right. It looks cartoony because the white in, let's say, sunlight or white in the LED light in the city that we're visiting, the brightness is all same. It's around 100 nits. And if you think about a lot of the devices like iPhone and our MacBook and computers can achieve at least like 300 nits to 500 nits. In some case, HDR, uh, you can achieve 1,000 nits in some of the latest laptops. So when you're looking at the VR headset, currently it's only 100 nits, so it's not very bright. That means when you're looking at the sun in the VR, it's just a white paint. It's just a white
Yeah.
color, right? It actually doesn't look bright in your eyes. And that's really odd if you think about uh, the Turing test, right? On how we perceive the world. When I look at the sun, like, oh, it's bright, I can tell. And when I look at the reflection of the paddle, oh yeah, it's like a bright sunlight reflecting on the paddle into my eyes. It's bright. But that's how I perceive the world. It's very natural. If I only look at the world through the lens of the consistent brightness, something looks weird. It doesn't look realistic. And all these weird inconsistency adds up to like a motion sickness and the odd feeling where like I can't wear this headset for a long time because it just doesn't feel
Mm.
comfortable in my eyes, right? So this solves the problem, and they're experimenting to go up to 20K nits, 20,000 nits. And in the video, if you watch the full video, the host comments like, "Oh wow, like I can see the light coming into my eyes, and my pupil reacts." Right, our eyes naturally, the pupil shrink when we look are in the bright environment, and our pupil opens up more when we're in the dark environment. Right, so it actually has a physical effect that makes things perceive as natural. And all these three things combined, where like I have high resolution, almost like world 2020 vision, and focus shifting to match where I'm looking at right away. So I can see the depth within my visual. The distortions are corrected, and I can perceive the light brightness. And that basically solves a lot of the visual discomfort problem. And the last bonus section that they talk about is the form factor. When they can achieve high energy efficient light device that doesn't rely on like a big battery to operate. Basically, when you achieve all these goals that they're working on, and in they say like 5 to 10 years is what they're expecting all this to be like in that nice small form
Yeah.
factor. They can finally achieve this ergonomic weight distribution. So instead of the front heavy device that we have today, right, where everything is packed here, it's so heavy, so much battery power and all the big lens, mechanical lens in there, and everything is in there. Instead, you can shift the weight around so it's ergonomic. Essentially, they're trying to get you to wear this 24/7 and feel like it's just normal, because there's no difference between the real world vision and what you see in the VR. At least your eyes perceive it as it's the same thing. It's the same world. It's just virtual versus reality. So I talked a lot,
Hmm.
Johnny, to explain this. And anybody interested in this topic, I encourage you to watch the full 1 hour video. I try to explain this because when I watched it first time, I didn't quite get some of the terms that they throw around. They're smart engineers and they don't explain all the things that they talk about in the video, but it was very fascinating. Essentially,
Yeah.
where that VR is headed already at this point.
Yeah, they kind of basically revealed everything like, "Hey, this is where it's going." I think part of it is probably the reason they probably show it, Elisha, is to be like, hey, like, yeah, we're not there yet, but look at all the work we're doing. It kind of shows that they have a lot of technical depth and that they're massively investing in this future. This isn't like this like two-person team, right? This is a massive multi-billion-dollar investment of building towards this future. Maybe one clarification is I think you had said that they want to get to a time where you can wear this thing 24/7. Do you think that's actually true, the 24/7, or is it more of like to wear it for long periods of time for like a typical workday kind of thing? Or did they
Yeah, I
mention
think
that in
I
the video?
yeah, I think I no, 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 I think I just exaggerated, but
Okay, I was
basically
like, "Oh man, I hope not."
basically the goal. I mean, yeah, we might be in the Ready Player One world very soon, but basically
Yeah.
to the point where it's like, yeah, it's just comfortable. It's just like wearing glass. I wear glass unless I'm sleeping, right? And
Yeah.
maybe it's exaggeration to say 24/7, but I consider my glasses to be perfectly wearable, as long as I'm awake and doesn't get in the way when I sleep. I take it off, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, this is super fascinating. I think it's a really good way to like putting it through the Turing test, comparing it to real life to get to hyperrealism, to get to less motion sickness, to get to the right ideal form factor. Super fascinating. Yeah, how long is the video if I wanted to watch that?
1 hour and 20 minutes or so.
That is amazing. We had a
Yeah.
comment in here that said very interesting from Sarah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's definitely super interesting. All the work that's kind of going into it. Definitely one of the bigger organizations out there that are investing in this future. Um, And I think it might beg the question, I think leading into this next section here, Elisha, around um, this idea, and maybe we'll stay to your slides if that's okay,
Yeah.
on your screen. But if you go to the next screen, it kind of leads this bigger question of um, what would trigger mass adoption for virtual reality. So we're looking at a futuristic 10 years out potential headset that we might have. It might look slightly different. Obviously, things change. A lot changes in 10 years. But as far as the actual elements of like brightness and focal length and resolution, we talked about a lot of those things in your portion there. Those are all important things as it relates to getting to the hyperrealism, getting to the everyday wearable kind of thing. But if we think about more near term, right? Maybe um, think about the next, who knows, 1 to 3 to 5 years, and thinking about virtual reality. This is the question I hear the most. And this is something that I hear for a lot of technology, Elisha. So when we talk about extended reality, which was something we've covered out in the past, XR, um, like when we talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, the metaverse, those are all different pieces of technology that are out there. And people often say, like, Great, they're out there. Should my business be investing in it? Should we be investing in advertising for it or creating experiences? Should we not? And so there's a lot of questions around that. And really, one of the biggest things that I tell people is what you want to wait for, honestly, is yes, experiment, yes, form strategies, but you want to wait for mass adoption of the technology. And so there's that question of what is considered mass adoption. There's a lot of perspectives on what mass adoption is. But here on the next slide is just a view into some other pieces of technology, other technologies, or even and towards the bottom of this is some social platforms or even gaming platforms, and how long it took for these particular technologies to get to the 50 million user mark. So if you look at planes, for example, on the very top left, you have it took 68 years. It took 68 years to fully adopt to get to 50 million users. Um, uh, to have people basically start being in planes. And it kind of makes sense. There's these massive pieces of metal up in the sky with engines, and it's like it would make sense that it would take quite a long time. And that was obviously back in the day. Thinking about cars, you go to 62 years, telephones 50, electricity 46, radio 38. I'm gonna skip the next row here, but then you go to like the internet. It took 7 years. I always go back to that clip with Bill Gates and David Letterman. I just love that to see the skepticism around the internet. But it took 7 years to get to the 50 million user mark. Still a pretty long period of time for something like the internet. And then you start to get to other things like the iPod. Um, uh, so 4 years on that, and then you get to these like social media platforms. So you're seeing that as you go from top to bottom, left to right, it basically like the adoption is increasing more and more as we go. And part of that is just because technology is more and more accessible, right? Having mobile phones and having accessibility on a mobile phone allows us to adopt newer technologies, newer apps. So it kind of makes sense. It's like this culmination and like acceleration of adoption that's happening. If we were to chart these, and I don't have this on this graph, if we were to chart these and say, how long did it take and see them on a chart, everything in the last like 10 years is drastically kind of shooting up in adoption. And so it brings in this question again. If you think about technology, VR here, or AR, or the metaverse, if you were to put those as little icons in here, there's that question of how long? How long is it start? When did it start? And how long is it taking to adopt that piece of technology? And it reminds me, Elisha, I don't know if you remember, I threw this slide in here and the next one. This is 2016, July 6, 2016. And I think you and I were in the Bellevue, Washington office, and I think
Mhm.
my wife was out of town, and there was this brand new game that just came out on the iPhone. It was like the first time that we were seeing a big name like Pokemon use a technology like augmented reality on the smartphone. That was kind of the big piece of technology. But I mean, it was obviously a callback to our youth of Pokemon. And we went to, what park was this? Can you tell us a little bit about what
Yeah,
happened when we
Bellevue
went?
Downtown Park is, yeah, where this was located. And basically, it's a geolocation based game, right? So they would plant the rare Pokemons in this park. So naturally, everyone drove up here into the downtown park in Bellevue. And one day, I think it was like when it was at a peak. I think we heard
Yep.
about this event or something, or it was the weekend after Pokemon Go came out or something, and we were
Yep.
like,
A couple days
"Let's
in.
go!" Like we heard they're rare Pokemons, and then we both went there, and we like run like these other people, because if the Pokemon pops up in the field, they're only like there for
A few
like few
seconds.
minutes. Yeah, so
Yeah, a
like
few
we have to
minutes.
just run to the location physically, because you have to be in that coordinate area, right, to be qualified to like even try to catch the Pokemon. So I remember just us
Yeah.
running around the park.
Yeah, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, what does this example have anything to do with it? Well, it was something that got released, and we were in this small portion, our little bubble here in Bellevue, Washington, and we were in just a single park, and you're seeing hundreds of people. This is not just children. This isn't children. That's like the minority, the smallest group of people here were children, and maybe Gen Y. What you saw was millennials that grew up with Pokemon, right? And
Mhm.
hundreds of kids just running around, hundreds of adults, really,
Yep.
college kids and up, running around catching a Pokemon. And it was for me, it was one of the first times in my life where I've seen such like interest and like hype around something that got released. Maybe standing in line for the iPhone. I remember doing that early on with like the I was one of those people that stood in line once to get the early iPhone. I remember seeing that being like, wow, this is crazy. Like people like iPhones and people are willing to stay overnight to like stand in line for this stuff or Black Friday and stuff. But Pokemon Go was an example of they took 19 days to go from 0 users to 50 million users. That number is way higher obviously now. There's been other things since then. Obviously Pokemon Go is not VR. It's not a technology like wearing glasses every day or wearing VR. It's a similar example of showing adoption, but it's slightly different. And so going back to that question is like if mass adoption is 50 million users, we're not there yet from a Meta Quest perspective. Lots of headsets were sold over Christmas. Lots of people are adopting them. So that question, going back to it, of what will it take to get to mass adoption? My perspective is, and I'd love to ask you the same question, Elisha, but my perspective is that we are looking for these advancements that we just talked about. We're looking for more ergonomic headsets, something that you can wear for longer periods of time, something that gives you less headaches and makes you less sick, right? Something that is more affordable and accessible to more amount of people. So right now it's still at a pricier, you're talking console level pricing right now. So those are some factors that play into it. But then there's also things like killer use cases. Um, Reasons to basically pick it up because there's something like a Pokemon Go or something like that, which takes us to this next screen. Actually, that's I think it's a good leeway into this. There's rumors of a game, a metaverse environment. I guess it's a virtual gaming platform that is considered a version of the metaverse. I think that's maybe the best way to define that. And Roblox has a huge amount of Gen Z users. Um, they are at 50 million daily active users. 50 million kids, basically 67% of those are under 16 years old, are opening Roblox on their mobile phones, on a PC, on mainly those devices essentially, and they are playing Roblox. And there are rumors. The screenshot at the top, Elisha, is actually coming from their quarterly reports. So I mean, there's a Quest headset on the top left already. So there's already like some leaks and some speculation. And then this week there's a lot of rumors around Roblox coming to the Meta Quest. So I mean, great. Like not all of us play Roblox. Not a huge deal, maybe for you and I. But what that means is you're giving more accessibility to a standalone MetaQuest version of the Roblox game in a headset like the Quest, where you might have a portion of those 50 million users that are there daily, right? We're talking, if you go to monthly, you're talking 300 million users. Quite a lot of users that might want to go into that more immersive portion, that more immersive experience for them, and get to experience Roblox on a different platform. It is currently, there's some workarounds, Elisha, to get it to work on a Quest, but it's not a native, app that's available to just download on the App Store. It's kind of a workaround, so not a lot of people play it on their Quest headsets. But this would be a pretty big killer use case for a full generation of people. Um, and so it's a kind of an interesting piece of news that I wanted to put in here in this section around what it would take for VR mass adoption. But I'm curious about your perspective outside
Yeah.
ergonomics and the cost going down slightly for more accessibility, killer use cases. What other things come to mind as things that would trigger more adoption of these MetaQuest or other standalone headsets for virtual reality to be mass adopted in the world?
Yeah, I think there are some, I think, popular incentives that are usually always out there. Like GPUs sold a lot because of the mining of the crypto, and some of the industry coming in, and a lot of people get incentivized to do X and Y, and some of them I probably won't name in the show uh, for some appropriate reasons. And I think all these things that you mentioned make sense, right? Like headset, like, okay, I only have one use case, which is to experience the VR world. But if my company requires that, oh, we're going to meet in the metaverse for meetings, and then it's distributed, well, like in school, iPads, tablets, right? Now kids are taking replacing the textbook with the tablets. So when there's like a forcing mechanism that would come in to the market where like, oh yeah, Meta is gonna sponsor, 100 schools in the district to provide the headsets, and kids would naturally have experience to it. I think Microsoft did such a great job with that, with just giving Office license sometimes for free for education purpose. Just basically massively distribute this product and uh, you know grow the next generation of customers automatically. I think
Yep.
some of the incentive mechanism basically would help with the mass adoption.
Interesting. So incentive based side of things, especially when it's coming from the top down. So organizationally, whether that's a school, a university, like a company, um, when organizations say, "Hey, this is the new standard that we're using to consume or to educate or to learn," then it starts to trigger that interesting. Outside of just like watching TV shows and playing some games periodically, you start to have
Yeah,
more and
like
more use.
TI-83 calculator. Why do we have to pay $100 for the calculator? Because that was forced on us, right? If it wasn't for that case, I don't need that calculator. But if there's a use like, oh yeah, we need it for school, oh we need it for work, I think people can easily justify, especially if it's funded. But even if it's not funded, I think people are willing to are more incentivized to perform, to hit high grade, or to comply with the work, career
Interesting.
growth. There's some kind of incentive, right? Like how does it benefit me besides
Yep.
just fun time?
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
well, since we're close to
Agreed.
the end of the time, we're gonna skip the question of the week. We're just gonna save it for the next
Yeah,
time.
that's
But
okay.
Johnny, I really want to make sure we highlight your podcast appearance
Sure.
recently.
Yeah, this is a cool opportunity. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning for anybody that watches that Elisha and I are, we're covering a lot of emerging technology. We talk a lot about the metaverse. We talk about AR, VR. A ton of our show today was about VR, but we're looking at a lot of emerging trends and technologies. We definitely speak and have spoken at different locations, whether that's in person or on a podcast or that kind of format. We enjoy doing that kind of thing. So recently I had the opportunity to join Brian Walker, who's the host of Bloomreach's podcast called Commerce Experience. And so this is just like a screenshot from LinkedIn on the right, and on the left it's from their page. But it's a podcast that talks about the metaverse, and they actually are really like looking at it really objectively and saying, even the title of it's called the metaverse, right? Where it's kind of like meh, like maybe it's not, maybe don't spend time on it quite yet, maybe not. And so they have a few parts that talk about the metaverse, and I came in and spoke on their part two to talk about some practical basically like just getting into more of like the definitions, how brands might have utilized the metaverse, maybe some roadblocks for building and sustaining in the future. So it's a cool podcast. Check it out. You can look it up at Commerce Experience, Bloomreach. It's about a 45-minute episode. It was a good time, but mainly what I wanted to bring up on this, Lesh, is that you and I, we're welcome to join anybody, any companies that are talking about or interested in talking about the metaverse or these emerging technologies, XR, AR, AI, ML, that kind of thing. We've done some speaking engagements. I talked about the Ion in Houston a couple of weeks ago, and we plan on continuing to be out and kind of sharing some knowledge, educating, consuming, and educating on these technologies. So definitely reach out if you're interested. We'd love to kind of join and be able to kind of represent Fresh Consulting, our company, but also talk about these topics and how they might affect different industries and your business and things like that.
Yeah, and if some companies are like, we're ready to jump on, like just tell us what we should start doing. I think
Yep.
we'll be happy to be strategic partner for you, and across any industries. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of consultations, we even build things ourselves. So if you have any projects in mind, or if you don't know what you want to work on, but your company needs to be on the more cutting edge side to be more competitive against your competitors, please talk to us. Please, you can reach us at LinkedIn. You can follow us on Johnny
Yeah, I think the next
Rodriguez,
slide shows
Elisha
that.
Tourette. Oh, sorry. Let me go to the next
Oh, you're
slide.
good. But yeah, this is kind of the best way to reach us, I think.
Yeah, so these are best ways to reach us individually. You can always leave a comment on YouTube, comment section as well. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Fresh Labs. We have a page on LinkedIn where you can get more news like these things. We always post some of the content even some of the segments from the past shows. But this live show is one great way to just catch up every week, just for 1 hour while you eat lunch. You can just catch up to what's going on, and we try to pick one of the most important things that happen over the week, and we try to break it down so it's really easy to consume and understand. So if you haven't already, hit the bell on the YouTube stream or follow us on LinkedIn page where you also get notified. And I hope to see you guys next week at the same time, noon Pacific time on Wednesdays. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.